At KVRX, there are a lot of cool and interesting people, but I think very few can ever compete with our next guest. He's a man of mystery, excitement, and execution. His photos dazzle, his music invigorates, and his stories capture. I'm talking about the one and only Abhi Velaga. Abhi and I almost were roommates at one time. We talked about renting houses my junior year during our KVRX meetings. Sadly, that never happened, and I still think to this day how our lives would have changed if we were. On this episode, I get to talk about him and his life, photography, and music. I learned a lot about him and his life, and I hope you do as well. So please enjoy our interview and a selection of songs from his album, No Drive Will Take Me Home.
This call is now being recorded.
Hi, Abhi. How are you?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for coming on to Arenas Regions, talking to me about photography and what it's like to be a legend. Because in my life, Abhi, I can say definitively that you're one of my biggest inspirations just because you're such a great creative and you continue to have such high standards in everything you do.
Well, I appreciate it. I didn't know all that.
Always, Abhi. I've always been a big fan of yours. And so, to get things started, I wanted to ask you, you have a shot of a couple at the Golden Gate Bridge, and the caption is, "I wish I knew you," which I think perfectly encapsulates the life of a photographer. You capture these moments, you show off these experiences, yet so few know the man behind the camera. This is why I wanted to do the interview in the first place, because you have such an incredible take on life and the way you show photos. I was wondering if you could tell me how long you've been a photographer and what got you started into photography.
First of all, you did your research. I know exactly the photo you're talking about. I posted that like 2.5 years ago, I think, in California. But I started shooting, I've always been a film photographer. That's just, I'm not like picky about it, but that's just the only medium I enjoy with photography. I picked up photography in like junior year of high school. I kind of realized that film photography has this different look, and I was really curious to try it out. And so I found my parents' old camera and got a few rolls of film and started experimenting with that. And my thought at the time, because it was like, it cost money per roll. So my thought was, okay, I'm going to shoot this carefully. I'm only going to shoot, because I like the nostalgic look that you immediately get with it. So my plan was, I'm only going to shoot a couple of photos of memories that I consciously know I want to cherish. And the cool thing about that is when you get, it took me 3 months to shoot this like first roll. And it was only 24 photos, and I get it back, and it's like the most curated capture of like those 3 months. Because I had moments where I was like, okay, this is a memory I want to capture. And also because of that, I don't have a lot of crap mixed in or like just like extra shots or messy shots. It's like I took my time with these. So that's how I got started. That's what kind of got me curious and passionate about photography. And then when I got to, and like the part about that was like really, the film aspect of it really kept me engaged. It was much more exciting to me. And then when I got to college, I started taking photography classes in the art department, like studio art classes. And that's when the professors really introduced me to the fine art aspect of photography and started teaching me about that and pushing me in that direction and introducing me to new ways to use the medium and just exposing me to like real good fine art photography.
Of course, I noticed that there's a big difference between your first photos you took. I believe it was a Fuji 400, right?
Yeah, how do you know this?
Because I did my research, and then you
had you're pulling a Nardwuar here.
Around, yeah, and then hey, you have a photo of him too.
I do. Oh my God, yeah.
You went from the Fuji to more of a digital camera. I noticed there's a shift in, I guess, the tone of your photos, and I was wondering, is that because that when you have a film camera, you have only 24 shots, or I have one that's only 36 shots. You have to be more conscious with the way you set up your photos. Is there a way you set up your photos differently in regards to digital versus film?
I actually don't shoot digital. I'm not sure. I've played with digital a little, but the only cameras I own apart from my phone are all film.
Oh, really? Wow.
But when I shoot, a few photos, like a handful of photos on my Instagram are digital, and I think I usually mention what it is. Yeah, there's a massive difference when you learn to shoot with film versus digital because you actually have to think about the value of each photo. Is this even worth taking? And then if it is so, you don't want to just snap it. You're forced to think about it. Like, is this truly the best composition? Because I'm only going to afford myself 2 photos for the scene that I'm looking at. So when we find the best composition, I will take like 30 seconds, a minute, deciding what is the best version of the scene to take. Take that one photo and then walk away. With digital, you never get to think that deep about the photo or you usually don't. You're not pushed to think that intelligently about the photo. And that's what makes you better photographers, when you think about those aspects and you kind of actually really analyze the scene. And so, but it also it really helps you not just learn better, but also come out with better photos because you're forced to put in this effort. And that's why to a lot of photographers, it's a really good idea, especially beginners, to start off with film, just because that makes you learn to think about shooting, and then move to digital where you might have more flexibility.
Agreed. I'm taking a photography class right now, and I've always shot with film. This is the first time I'm shooting with digital, and I have found it honestly a lot more difficult to shoot with digital because they're teaching us to shoot, because they want 72 outtakes, and so that's a lot. That's 3 rolls worth of work.
I can't even do that because I shoot so little.
Right, agreed. And so I feel like that's kind of watered down my ideas sometimes.
I disagree with that idea that you have a required amount of outtakes.
Yeah, right.
It really should just be a required amount of good quality, like, select
photos, right?
Yeah.
Select, of course. In my class, we're learning, of course, it's about photography, and we're learning about the rules of photography, like the rules of thirds. And I was wondering if you could explain some key rules or concepts of photography, and I guess ways to break them.
I think this applies to every single field out there. The rules are meant to be broken and forgotten. So it's amazing. It's really good, and you probably should, for any field, learn the basic rules. Oh, here, you got to use your rule of thirds. Here's how you properly compose the photo. You always want to meter evenly, like the basic composition and photography principles. Once you learn them, you want to forget them. And this applies to every single field I can think of, because you can't really just keep shooting with that one thing. You rarely see professional pictures that actually use those very literally. They might make use of it more intelligently, which is what kind of happens because at that point it becomes a subconscious piece of knowledge, but you don't actually think about it or try to use it. It'll just come into play when you're looking at different stuff. And maybe you won't use rule of thirds literally, but you might find a way that you think about, what if I cut up this composition in a funny kind of ratio. As for my own rules, I don't think I have my own personal rules not rules, but personal kind of workflows that I apply to myself. And I think the biggest one, and one of the keys to my aesthetic, is I'll always shoot with film, and I'll always shoot, a lot of times I will try, and this is like a real big secret. Not a kept secret. I'm always happy to share it, but I'll try and expose a photo for as long as I can, because the light builds up and you get a different looking scene than what you actually saw with your eyeballs. Basically, like, that's why long exposure, that's what long exposure photography is. If you just look up long exposure photos, any of the photos you get from that technique don't actually look like the literal scene in real life, because your eyeballs see with, like, I think the equivalent of a 60th shutter speed, a 60th of a second. Right. So when you take a long exposure, like if you expose a scene for 8 seconds or even a minute, it builds up this light in a very interesting way, especially if you have colored lighting. That colored lighting will actually build up and be more prominent than it was in the real scene. So what I do with that is, and I also love the way that looks on film. It totally changes the aesthetic of the photo. So what I try and do is I try and bring in colored lighting, or that's why I shoot a lot at night, is I can do long exposures and there's little subtle hints of light that'll build up better. And I look for the longest exposure I can make. Yeah, that's a big secret. Like, I'm sure you've seen my album cover. I think that's like a minute or a minute and a half exposure, and that's when that's how the sky turns blue. And that was shot at like 2 a.m. pitch black. It's pretty much pitch black from my view.
I've always been amazed by how much light you have in your photos and how everything is just so detailed at night, because that's a lot of trouble people have.
Exactly. Tripod is such a pain. It's such a pain to use a tripod though, because you don't have as much flexibility on your scene. But yeah, I take a tripod and I use some sort of remote shutter release. I'm not actually pressing the button, which can shake the camera a little on the tripod. So if I have a cable release, I can pull the thing on the cable. It won't shake the camera as much when it starts and stops. So on average, I'll try and go for around an 8-second photo if possible. But it also depends. Like if it's too bright outside, I can't pull it off. But yeah,
that's the cover you're talking about. Is that No Drive Will Take Me Home?
Mm-hmm. That's shot from the top of Mount Bonnell. You can actually, so that's the Austin skyline. You can see the UT Tower a little to the left of it. It's like this orange tower. One of the more noticeable pieces in it, but it's all really small.
To diverge a bit, I was curious why you go as Indulgent and why you don't continue using the moniker Forward to Restart or Sunburst Box.
Oh my gosh. Forward to Forward to Restart wasn't much. It was just like a little, it's not a solo project. It was just a name that my middle school best friend and I, Patrick, who actually studies music at TCU, we were just putting out music for fun on SoundCloud. Didn't do much with it. And then what was the other thing you mentioned?
Sunburst Box.
Oh yeah, that's just like my username that I'd use for stuff. Everyone, kind of has usernames sometimes that they find they identify with. One of my friends had a username called Drizzly Box, and I kind of like that idea of using box. And my favorite color, because this is me as a guitarist, hardcore guitarist at the time, I love sunburst colored guitars. Like my guitar is sunburst color, so I was just on a Sunburst Box. And I actually stopped using that username. If you look at my stuff now, it uses my real name, like my Instagram.
Oh yeah, I know
Twitter.
that.
So I switched all that because I wanted to be more searchable. But yeah, it doesn't mean anything. But Indulgent, because the idea with my solo project, I guess a lot of people might not know about Indulgent. My solo project is called Indulgent, and I put out music under that name on Spotify and Apple Music and all that. And in these recordings, I play everything. So I play guitar, bass, drums, and I sing. So I write all the music, go into a studio and record and put it out. But I chose Indulgent because I really wanted it to be like a band that I was giving a head start. So if I can get a band together, we already have music out.
Right, of course.
And I also felt like my name wouldn't be really easy to share or pronounce. Like if you see my name spelled out Abhi Velaga, it's not the most intuitive to pick up. And I also really like this idea of just having a moniker where I don't necessarily feel like this is me literally and I can express myself more. And I kind of like this phrase Indulgent because I don't know, I really identified with that at the time. And I still like it. I like the sound of it. I like how it rolls off. And I like how it kind of like plays my weaknesses, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
But now I always rethink that, like, oh, what if I just put it under my I wish I kind of put it under my real name because then it's just more searchable. But it is what it is, and I still put out music under that.
Do you put out your photos, stuff that you published? It's like Miami Vice. You have some Miami one. I forgot exactly the title
Vice
of your
Cocaine
content.
Dream.
Yes. Is that under you as Abhi Velaga, or is it under Indulgent?
Actually, no. I've never thought about using a moniker for like visual arts. That's just always been under my name. I guess because I don't think of visual arts as shared by the artist as much. Okay. Like a lot of times when you're talking with friends, you might share a musical artist like, hey, do you listen to so-and-so? Photography kind of speaks more for itself, and people usually share the photo more often. At least I feel like people share the photos more often before they know who took them. And I don't really have any interest to mask myself with that. My photography doesn't feel like it's expressing myself that hard as music does. Music is me pouring in my heart and
your soul,
singing about like my depression, or like when I was younger, like my first album, which was like really lo-fi, is really angsty and teenagery. But my visual arts feels a little less like I'm expressing myself and more like I'm exploring like different realities or different fantasies. I'm more exploring everything outside of me rather than inside of me. If that makes sense.
So it does make sense. To touch on that, I was wondering if you can tell me about the difference in platforms and how you judge and know what goes on Instagram versus what goes into magazines or Twitter, or even on YouTube.
That's always fun. That's always a challenge. I really hate how much I focus on how many likes my photos might get, because a lot of times those photos that I know are good don't get as many likes as one of a girl, just a portrait of a girl. regardless of how good or not good that portrait might be. A lot of times those default to higher likes. But I don't know, it's usually I think maybe 2 or 3 photos from every 15 photo roll make it. And it's really hard to decide what ones to use. I think a lot of times I'll send out, kind of get a feel for it by sending them out to a few of my like close friends. And I do this with my music as well. Like I have I think like 3 friends that I'll always send it to, that I'll send my latest work to whatever medium. There's Chandler, Anya, and Kaylin. I think those are the 3 that I generally send, especially Chandler. He's like my best friend, and he goes to Lamar, so he's not always in Austin. Yeah, he's been my best friend since high school. And we share a lot of interests, and we understand each other's tastes really well, both in like music and visual arts. I'll often like send both my like photography and the latest music. I actually like sent him a demo the other day, just to kind of like, as a feeler, like, what do you think? Like, is this something I should explore? But it's really hard, and I try at this point not to think about it too much and just kind of post it, because it's just social media. It doesn't really hurt anything. I'm not posting anything that's like not good. And sometimes I'll experiment. Like when I first started posting, my first series was that Miami Vice Cocaine Dream, where I was exploring. It was my first series ever, and I was really exploring this idea of like turning my house into this fantasy. And the funny part is some of those photos were not exaggerated at all. Some of those photos were actually the true, completely honest scene in front of me. And then I showed it to my professor, and he was like, I love this, but it'd be cool if you could push it, if you could add fiction. So then the later photos from that series, I started adding a bit more light, different colored lighting, different props to kind of push the reality. But that was kind of my first series. And then my second series was called User Void. And that was really good. Well, thank you. That's the one I was a little hesitant about posting, because I wasn't hesitant, but I knew it probably wouldn't do as well. And it was a bit of an experiment for me to post, because this was a series that I shot while I was taking my operating systems class, my major. I'm a computer science major. I'm not sure if we mentioned that.
No, we didn't.
That was a hell of a class. Everyone's always told us like operating system is the peak of the major. It's the hardest class to get over. Once you're over that, it's relatively smooth sailing from there to the end of the degree. And that class was like, it put us through so much, and it kind of really taught us the meaning of hard work. And so that I started shooting the series to kind of document all of these people. And that's why it has a little bit of a dark, depressing tone to it. Because the class is my favorite class I've ever taken, but the amount of work we had to put in, the way we also bonded through that was very fascinating. And so that series explores that. But that was an experiment to post, because there's no pretty girls under colored light. I feel like that's a series, that's kind of like a funny label theme that I've noticed in some of my earlier work that I'll kind of joke on, and now I try and purposely avoid that.
What?
Like pretty girls under colored light. Pretty girls? Yeah, I mean. Like pretty girls under pretty light or under colored light is what a lot of my earlier work looked like. So it was a crazy experiment, and I didn't use any colored light. I used a bright, normal light, non-colored light, and I just and also a flash. I wasn't actually, instead of making things look good, I was trying to actually document the reality. So that was kind of an interesting twist what I'd usually worked in. But at the same time, it falls in line with that theme that I always have with my work, where I'm trying to explore different realities. So when you look at that, it doesn't really look like normal people in a normal place. It kind of looks like that something's going on, something's a little different. The lighting I use brings a totally different mood to it. So that was a real experiment when I posted it, because I knew like it's not going to do as well, which honestly it doesn't matter to me, because likes don't really mean much at all. I was actually surprised at the response. Like a lot of people really liked it.
I have this one photo that always sticks out to me. It's a group of guys, and they're just staring at a screen, and I can see like the white T-shirt with the orange text.
Is this the one with like 4 or 5 intently staring?
Yes.
And I'm like right above the monitor from behind it?
Yes, and it's such a crazy shot.
Thank you.
It's so simple, but like it tells so much.
Mm-hmm. So that is one of the photos that started the series. That's one of the photos I showed to my professor, and he's like, wait, like, can you elaborate on this? Can you work on this? Because you just hit on something here.
No, that's just a crazy shot. I was just curious, like, how did you set that up? Because you're talking about lighting. I was wondering if you can touch more on how you lit that.
Right. So all of the scene is nonfiction. It's real. I didn't modify anything. I didn't set anyone up. I didn't ask people to work. The only thing I did was I was still a little hesitant about blasting people in the face without their consent because they're all working really hard. So I asked people, hey, is it cool if I take a picture of my project? There's going to be a bright flash. But yeah, so for that project, most of the entire project, I used an off-camera single flash. So I had a remotely triggered flash that fires with my camera, but I held it in my hand off to like an upper left or upper right diagonal. And I had my camera settings set up so that it would meter for the flash. So essentially, like when the flash fires, it's going to light them up really bright. And the exposure is toned down, so that would be your normal brightness. And that's what creates the really dark background.
Oh.
So the key there is the single flash, and relatively close, like within a few feet. And I put the flash pretty bright so that there's a greater contrast between the brightness of the subject and the background. So that was new to me. That was me learning and exploring.
I would say, to go back a bit, you were talking about pretty girls, right? And I was wondering, do you enjoy more portrait photography, like shooting Kevin Tang or Donovan Bogny or Elena Easter, or do you like more landscape shots?
How much research did you do? You just named like some of the people I went to high school with. Yeah, when I started
I got more too.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, when I started off photography, it was very vanilla, right? It was just me shooting pictures of my friends. And so one of the first all the beginning from memory, like almost like disposable camera pictures, one of the first like actual conscious moves I made was trying to shoot more portraits. And that's something I'd really enjoy, and I haven't done much of lately, but that was kind of the first main thing. But right now and for the past year or two, my favorite subject is night photography, a lot of times mixed with architectural photography. I actually really don't care to have people in it as much. I'm trying to mix them in and explore different ways to merge ideas. But I love just looking at a scene that might have hints of interesting color, especially at night, because then I can pull that long exposure trick, try and photograph that. And I think one of my favorite therapeutical things to do in my entire life is drumming and just taking my camera and going out into the night for a few hours with no plan except just wandering and taking long exposure photos alone. It's so much fun, and I can just quietly just think, and I can look at different scenes, look for different interesting color. A lot of times I'll search for like, oh, this one house has like a broken light which is turning red. Like I love how creepy that looks. Or if I can find
playing with different colors of the film too.
What do you mean?
I remember I went to a park and we were having some KVRX meetup, and you were taking photos of us and you were explaining that you're using purple film or something.
Yeah, that was an experiment. The film was called Lomography Purple Chrome. Actually, I forgot the name as I said it, but it's under the Lomography brand. But yeah, that was an experiment that I didn't really care much for the results of. But that thing actually would take the colors around you. It would twist. It would shift colors that are usually natural colors like green and yellow, like vegetation, and turn those purple, but try and retain the brown of a skin tone. So it was kind of cool where it would only try and shift, like if you put a person in a forest and took a picture, it would try and keep their color accurate, but it would dramatically shift the background color. Yeah, that was a fun experiment, but I didn't really get anything out of it that I cared about.
So you don't use that anymore for your long exposures at night?
No, yeah, and the roll that you were talking about is the only roll I ever shot of that. All of my photos are true. I mean, I'm always open to shifting colors wildly, but I've never found any success in that where I got something I really liked enough. Usually I find much more success out of capturing a scene that is lit really weird. And then I'll try and exaggerate the amount of color in it with the long exposure. Or I'll bring in my own lighting. Like sometimes for some of my night exposures, I've brought in a flash and I'll put a colored gel on it, and I'll set like a timer or something, run off, fire the flash in the scene, and then come back. So there's a few photos, not many, where I've done that.
I was going to ask you where you honed your skills. Was that at the Allen High School?
No, it was in the Fine Arts Department at UT. That and the professor there, Eli Durst, I love him, were kind of really where my photography flourished. Because when I was back home in high school, it was really just me taking pictures of friends, and that's where I found a passion for it. But even when I got to college, I was still kind of just taking fun pictures of friends. I didn't try anything much with it. And people liked my photography, but there was no real big special element to it apart from just the content, I guess. But when I started taking those fine art classes, only because I'd heard that they were using film, which was true. They had like a real dark room and everything. So I love that. That's what really introduced me to fine art photography and fine art thinking and having much more control and actually setting up stuff, not just taking a picture of a scene, but like fine art photography a lot of times can be you create a scene. That's why you can have models and stylists. I mean, that delves more into fashion photography, but the idea of just make a photo, don't just take a photo. I credit the UT photography department and Eli Durst. If you look up Eli, he's a pretty popular photographer. I mean, he's still young. He has a lot of big work online.
I think I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah, he posts about his dog Judy.
Abhi, where are some of your favorite places you've taken photos? And where are some hidden gems in Allen and in Austin? Like a Celebration Park one?
No. Celebration Park is a big park in my hometown of Allen, Texas, and it's pretty empty. It's just a really fun park, but photography-wise, I didn't get much out of it. Some of my favorite places. Oh. Well, obviously, number one is my own house. Wherever I'm living, it always turns out weird. I always add really cool lighting, and most of my work, like Miami Vice Cocaine Dream, was focused on my house, inside and like right around. But in Dallas, I've never found much that interesting, and that's mostly because I've searched in suburban areas. But in Austin, I've noticed there's a weird West Campus. First of all, is kind of weird, especially if you go more north, a little out of the apartments. And then if you go, I don't know what the name of this area is, but it's south of MLK. It's like between MLK and the center of downtown on the northwest side of this area, and there's still houses there. But it's still kind of downtown. So a few of my recent pictures were taken there. It's a really weird place, but it's kind of fun to go through because you can see the buildings in the background. But then you can find like a little, almost like a trailer park house looking spot. So I've taken a few photos there, but I haven't gone out much. And I try and also have to be safe. So usually I'll take my boosted board with me. I mean, that's how I'll get there as well. Is I don't have to park anywhere. I'll just ride my boosted board. But if I just really feel like I'm in trouble, which has never happened, I can quickly yeet away on it. I can't really think of much else because most of my work tends to be focused on the place I live and converting it into something more interesting.
Is that like Breckenridge 124B?
I actually never shot many photos there, but I don't know if you know that. Oh, you won't know this. So the first single from my studio album, Bleach Your Heart, if you look at the cover for that single, is a self-portrait of me in that dorm.
I think that's where I got the idea for Breckenridge 124B.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I assume that you got that from the mirror picture right outside the door.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's another self-portrait I took of myself inside, and that made the cover. But I mean, that was also freshman year of college, and that's before I'd really gotten into fine art photography. That's when I was taking beginning photography at UT. When I was still kind of just exploring black and white and night photography. And then in intermediate photography is where I really changed. That's when I made my series Miami Vice Cocaine Dream. And that's my first class I had with Eli. That's when it really started flourishing. I think that was first semester of sophomore year of college.
Is that where you're brushing your teeth and you're in the mirror? Is it during that time?
That was still freshman year. That was dorm. Yeah, that's always been a thing in my work where it's not a real series, but I love taking self-portraits for the main purpose of documenting my life to look back on, to have interesting snapshots of like, here's what I looked like on the daily basis. Here's what I kind of like dressed like. Here's me in what used to be my environment. Like at that time, it was just like that was what I looked like freshman year of college with my long hair and my massive plastic 3D looking glasses and my man bun. Still pretty skinny.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know, right? So
you and your Fireball whiskey shirt and black nail polish.
Oh gosh. My Doc Marten boots. Yeah. I like that I have this documentation. It's not just a memory. And I can always compare it to like newer self-portraits where I look different. I'm in a different location. Or even like my facial expressions might be different. You can see that I'm happier. Because freshman year I was suffering from like a lot of depression. And I think it was pretty evident in the self-portraits. I never smiled at all. And I still don't, but I just look really depressed in those, which I'm still
no more middle fingers out.
That. Yeah, I just kind of got rid of that as I grew up. I lost value in that.
I was curious, who your inspirations in life are. I know Kurt Cobain is one. I know Coach Key is one. So I was wondering who else are inspirations to you.
Wow, you dug deep. Yeah. Man, I actually put together a list of those a while back, but off the top of my head, Coach Key is my 8th grade history teacher. It's really funny that you pulled that out. John Frusciante is my favorite guitarist. He's the guy from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I've learned a lot about life and art from him. Oh man, you really put me on the spot.
Did you ever get that poster?
Which poster?
The John Frusciante poster. Did you ever get that?
I don't think so.
You wanted that with some guitar picks. That was your Christmas wish list.
Oh, you must have really pulled this out of somewhere from a long time ago because I can't even remember it. But I actually did find my list that I put together one time. There's John Frusciante. There's Elon Musk because of just Elon Musk and Steve Jobs kind of going hand in hand in terms of being a visionary, and especially Elon Musk and how crazy existential and far he will think of like, well, what really bothers me in life is the fact that we're only a single planetary species. That blows my mind. Rodney Mullen, the revolutionary skateboarder, absolute legend.
Yeah, most incredible skateboarder.
Yeah, I'm trying to see who's more notable. Casey Neistat, the YouTuber and movie maker. I mean, his way of conveying stories and his idea of how he converted his life into a story, a meaningful story, really inspires me every day and kind of makes me think about new ways to make art. Dorian Yates is the craziest bodybuilder to ever live. And he taught me everything about how to work hard. Because this guy, like, destroyed his body becoming the most crazy bodybuilder ever. He's one of those, like, almost like Navy SEAL-like, but he's not military at all, where they're really about working hard and, like, really just giving it your all. He is a madman.
A madman about everything.
Mm-hmm. And then on that same page, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the amazing bodybuilder. Who else is really notable on this list? I mean, I can list off a few others, but I'm not really thinking about them right now. I have Stuart Copeland, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Adam Savage, John Free, the photographer, Khalek Allah, a street photographer, amazing, Flea, the bassist, I already mentioned, Randy Posh, who's a computer science professor that passed away, who used to work at Carnegie Mellon. The Carnegie Mellon, the college, has a video series called, I think, The Last Lecture, something like that, where they take professors and they give them an opportunity to give one lecture for the series. And they say the kind of prompt is, if you knew you were going to die tomorrow and you could give one lecture over any topic you ever wanted to give, as in, what do you think would be the most meaningful thing for you to talk about, right? Like, oh, it's my last lecture. It doesn't have to do anything at all with what your career is about. But if you give one lecture to college students or just anyone, what would you make it about, and then actually do it, right? So Randy Posh was actually in a unique situation where he was dying of cancer. So, and he knew this, and everyone knew this. So his last lecture it turned out to be his second last lecture because he did one more a few months later. But his last lecture felt real because he actually was dying. And I don't remember I think it was time management or something. I haven't watched it in a while. I need to rewatch it. But it was a phenomenal election. I got a lot of respect for him from that.
I have that book here in my hand. Randy Posh, The Last Lecture.
You know him? This is crazy.
My mom told me I have to read this book. I came home for winter break one day. She goes, Reno, I know you've been trying to get into reading. You have to read this book. And it's called The Last Lecture. And it's been sitting on my desk for at least a good 5 months. And so I guess now I have a reason to read it.
Wow, yeah. That's actually crazy. Recently, do you know David Cho, the artist?
Yes, I know David Cho.
Yeah, so I've heard about him.
He's a madman too.
Yeah, he's a pretty big man. I didn't have any idea of how crazy he was until I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast recently that he did with him.
Right. Him going into African tribes and running with them for miles and miles.
Wow. Oh my God. You know exactly everything I know. This is so funny. But yeah.
He was trying to find the Loch Ness Monster or something too?
He was crazy at that point. Yeah, when he was 19. But the stories that he told and the way he somehow found happiness in his life and the richness of his life. He's had an extremely turbulent life, but the crazy amount of just the richness of his life, how he became a multimillionaire almost kind of by fluke because he got Facebook shares for painting their office. a long time ago, and he didn't actually expect Facebook to become anything, but how he's this amazing artist. He's gone through, in my understanding, a lot of like sexual and like verbal abuse. Like he's basically gone through lots of different kinds of abuse. He was always kind of unstable, like really depressed guy. He was in prison in, I think it's Taiwan, kind of unjustly. So he was in prison at the time for a while. So, and then he decided he would go searching for the Loch Ness Monster in the African Congo, and then he got there and he realized that he's crazy, and then he almost had a near-death experience, and then he ended up living with this native tribe for months. That really taught me a lot about life, and also makes you think about, like, all we know is, like, our society and technology and everything, but we totally forget about how, like, humans used to just be, like, normal creatures in nature and have to interact with nature. So that was crazy to really think about and kind of think about the meaning of life. Not the meaning of life, but kind of like what life used to be, or life is for other creatures that we have distanced ourselves from, kind of built our own life. I think those are the main people that come to mind. There's so many more that I love.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
As you illuminated talking about living life to its fullest, I was wondering, what was the last important role you had?
Last important role?
You had, correct, because you had a series of photos on your Instagram, and it said that this is an important role.
Oh, I thought you were asking last important role that you've taken in your life, not like photography, but just like as a role.
You could take it that way too if you'd like.
I'll answer both. The last important role is really easy. When my dog passed away a few months ago, and I instinctively, we had this like poodle that we rescued, Sam. He's like 5 or 6, and then he passed away from essentially heart failure really suddenly in July of this year. And I had literally just gotten home. It's all good, yeah. I appreciate it. But I had just got home to Alan, to my parents' place, and he was at the vet, and he was supposed to be fine. They were like supposed to bring him back. And then we get this call. It's like, oh, he's not doing so well. He's like on oxygen, and I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, what? Okay, I'm going to go see him. And I just instinctively grabbed my camera and ran, or like went to the vet. Yeah, it turns out he had been suffering heart failure for like a day or two, and had like his lungs were, he was pretty much passing away. I've always done this. The most important thing with photography for me is documenting the meaningful parts of my life, right? Like that's how the passion was born, right?
What you cherish, right?
Exactly. And I love the rewarding sensation of having these moments on film. I love how they look, and I love that I have something visual to it. It's not like I went through life and I have all these memories, but no, I keep an album of these prints together, so I can flip through these albums of my memories and my favorite memories. But yeah, I took some photos of that scene. I think the best photo, the most important photo from that role is a picture that I took of, he was, I think, conscious or unconscious, I don't really know, but he was on like an oxygen breathing tube for a bit. So this is like a really small poodle, like a 9-pound poodle. And so he has like hair, and so I had my hand like in his hair. Because I knew at that moment this would be the last time I'd like feel his hair, which is a texture I'm really used to. So I took a picture of my hand in his hair as he kind of laid just on his side on this, what turned out to be basically his deathbed. So that I think is actually the most recent role I've shot. I really have not been shooting much during quarantine. I mean, even if I shot a billion rolls since then, that'd probably still be my most meaningful one, my most recent meaningful one. I don't even know if I have a more, I mean, I guess I do have like meaningful photos, but that's one of the more lifelong meaningful photos I'll have for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah. I really want to know, because the fans have been asking me, Abhi, where is Abhi Express? We need to know how she's doing. I know she's not here with us anymore. I know you got rid of her, but where is the Abhi Express?
The Abhi Express is my minivan. It's a Honda Odyssey. I have no clue. The Abhi Express was a 2005 Honda Odyssey that we sold last year. So we sold the CarMax, so it's been auctioned off to someone. But I did get a replacement. I have a replacement, Abhi Express 2.0. That's at my house right now. That's a 2014 Honda Odyssey, same color, exact same specs, down to the DVD player.
Really? Have you shot any movies in it?
Have I shot any movies in it, or do you mean like watched any?
No, have you shot any movies? Because usually you shoot movies in your minivan.
No, I haven't. I mean, the main thing what I would do is I've shot a little bit of film in my old one, and I would mainly I would watch movies, like all my friends would get into the back and go to the top of the parking garage in high school and watch it, and watch movies in it. And then my battery died one time, and I definitely don't do that anymore, because now I'm scared of my battery dying. But yeah, I mean, I really don't have any memories with it right now, mainly because in college, your vehicle is not as central to your life as it was in like going to high school in a suburb. Back then, your vehicle was a core part of your life. You'd go everywhere with it. You'd hang out with your friends and drive around and go to the park or whatnot. That's when the Hobby Express was kind of like born, because it was just a thing like, hey, like I can see 8 people. We can all just travel in mine, or we can go in 3 different cars. You know?
Abhi, my last two questions are, what's in the vault, and when's the next album coming out?
What's in the vault, as in like anything new?
Yes, and then when's the album coming out?
So, what do I have in the works? My artistic practice, if you will, has shifted quite a bit lately. Rather than just taking a very established medium like music or photography, I'm trying to merge my passions more. So I'm trying to make more creative art with LEDs, make LED installations or interactive LED installations that are connected to the internet. Essentially, I think what's also called is like transmedia, right? Merging is medium. So I'm kind of exploring more of the world of technology art. And I mean, these are projects that I guess people won't see right now, but like the one I'm just started working on for my transmedia class, which I'm taking at UT, I'm turning my room into its own, like, I'm giving it like a living, breathing soul, if you will, by putting in LEDs and having the LEDs respond to the stimuli. So I'm putting a ton of LEDs in my room and connecting them to the internet where they can check the time and the weather. And I can put I can program with all these different animations. Like, for instance, if it's sunny, I could have it on some sort of default, like, go through some cool color fade during the day. But if the weather changes and it starts getting really cloudy or rainy, I can program it so that it'll automatically detect that and transition into like a starry twinkling animation to kind of match what's going on outside. You know, or especially when it turns night, for it to slowly transition from a really bright, colorful animation into a more quiet and duller, or a little darker, like the twinkling at night. And then also turn off automatically, turn on automatically, and then match the colors of the sunset and sunrise. So in the sunrise, or in the morning, it'll be completely black, but at the time the sun is actually rising, the same colors, the same bright orange and yellow will slowly grow in my room. So that's kind of like this crazy idea where I'm merging stuff, and it's totally doable. Like, I know what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing on a technical level, but I have no clue what the implications are and how big of a deal it might be, or what people might think of it. My main thing recently is working on merging my CS, computer science, because that's my major, and my passion for that with art, finding more ways to creatively use it, maybe work on creative web development, build interesting websites, or make a website and art installation, right? Like
I can say hello to you, right?
Yeah, so that, exactly. So for those who don't know, I have this website, abhi.work, abhi.work. That's like my portfolio website, but there's a page on it /hi where you can click a button and actually turn on LEDs that are at my desk physically right now. And I've actually been seeing it going off for the past 2 days. I don't know if it's you or what, but
I did it just an hour before this.
I saw that. Okay. Yeah, that was only when I got all day, and I was wondering who's even looking. I haven't posted about it lately. But yeah, so that was my first step of exploring this idea of like mixing networking or technology and art. And my thought process with that is, I'm a CS major. I know I'm picking up these skills, software. Hey, you just did it, right?
Yeah. Hello, Abhi.
Yeah. Hi. My thought process is, the most innovative art usually happens at the intersection of 2 different fields, or at the edge of something new. Like photography or painting or any established medium, in my mind, in my experience, hits a point where it can only be so fresh, it can only be as groundbreaking right? But if you merge two fields to make something brand new, that's more groundbreaking just alone on that fact. So what I'm trying to work on is finding ways to bring my passions together, because I have a unique perspective, and I'm trying to cash in on that. Not literally, but I'm a computer science major. I make music. I shoot photos. I know how to program LED strips and work and build electronics. This is a unique combination. What if I can make art that only someone from my perspective can make? And that alone will lead me to make something more unique, right? So that's kind of why I'm working on that. And then as for the album, I'm still going to always do music. I'm a musician first. I have like 10 songs that I'm working on. I did most of the writing in the first few weeks of quarantine, but it's more about how much time I can afford because of my degree in the classes to get studio time, because I can only get studio time when I don't really have classes, right? So usually winter break or spring break. But the plan is, I don't have an official plan. The plan in my head is I'll either get to record it this winter or the coming spring, and it'll be out like, I don't know, maybe 2 months after that.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a longer process than I like, but I mean, ideally I'd like music to go way faster, way more rapidly, and it can. It's just that my priority in life right now is finishing off my degree time. So because of that, I can't afford to spend too much time in one given moment. But yeah, I mean, I've been working on music today and the past weekend. So I would guess it would definitely be out by summer. If I record in winter, maybe even out by the coming spring. I'm excited. Oh, dude, I'm excited about that album, because the first album when I tried to put out when I worked on it mostly when I was 15. I think I put out
high school, 15, right?
Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school. I put out an album that you can still find today. It's called Toxic. This was before I knew that the Britney Spears album was the same name, and now I regret it. I thought it was the coolest thing until I found out about that. That thing, I recorded everything in my bedroom by myself with GarageBand, and I mixed it myself and had it mastered and then posted it. After that, my new workflow has become, I'll make demos in the exact same way. When I'm done with the demo, I'll go to a studio and re-record it properly. And the engineer, producer, I work with Carlos at Soundomatic Studio in North Dallas. He has really good, we share a pretty good taste, pretty similar taste, and I have a lot of respect for his musical ideas. So he kind of, in a way, acts as a bit of a producer on it. Whenever I'm working, he brings in a lot of new ideas and helps me really polish it off. So my first album was really lo-fi, really angsty. It was literally me in my bedroom. That's what you're hearing. The second album was it was recorded from junior year of high school to the very beginning of freshman year of college. It took a year and a half to record. That is me actually in a studio under better guidance, making a more polished product. Yeah, and that was actually turned out a bit softer than I expected, musical style-wise. The first one's really distorted. I had a half-stack amplifier just blasting and angsty and almost screaming. And the second one was way more polished and clean and a little shoegazy alt-rock. This new one is heavy. At least it's heavy for me. I'm playing in a drop B guitar, which is what a lot of metal guitarists play, tuning that people play in. And I'm trying to, because you ever watch me play music or jam? When I improv and I jam, I play much heavier than the music I write. For whatever reason, the music I write just turns out softer. So I've been trying to push myself and write differently. So the tracks on these are much heavier. Even if the music might not be that heavier, I'm doing this interesting thing where the guitar in the background is still really heavy. So I'm trying to mix it where there's points where I'm chugging on a really low-tuned, what by itself would sound like a metal riff, but then I'm singing like usual on top of it. So you kind of have these really soft, flowing choir backing vocals with nice melodies flowing over a bit more of a metal riff, which is kind of what the Deftones do. So I'm actually really excited to put out something different and try and actually play more write more like I actually play. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited too.
Yeah.
Abhi, is there anything else you'd like to add to our conversation that you think I did not get to cover?
You can find me on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff if you look up No Drive Will Take Me Home, and the artist name is Indulgent. And then my website is abhi.work, and that has actually links to everything. But I guess my final statement that I like to make, that I made once in high school on an interview, was the censored version is screw your idols. Because I think you should stop idolizing others and work on yourself.
Abhi, thank you so much for being on Reno's Regions. Again, I was looking at your old work, and I could not believe that it's been 2 years since I had you in the studio, and you played your guitar, and you were
Has it really?
about... Isn't that crazy? It's been 2 years since it happened.
Wow.
Life has
Yeah, that
flown
was
by.
such a fun
It's amazing.
time. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I've really enjoyed this. And
Of
you're
course,
always a pleasure to talk
hopefully we'll continue this in another 2 years. I'll have a real radio show.
That would be cool. You better invite me. That'd be awesome, though, if you could pull it off.
I want to thank Abhi again one last time for taking some time out of his busy day and letting me interview him. Now we have 2 songs coming up that I know you'll love. We have Foreign and Pleasure Cruise by Indulgent. Enjoy.
It's night, I see her eyes. She's fine, just not mine. And I dream all night that she's mine all the time. And I just watch. She's rolling out, can't keep sticking around. And I cry. Is she doing fine? Is she breathing fine? And I can't find it out. She's so hard to figure out. She's so lost in a cloud. You're so foreign to me, just like home. You're so foreign, and I imagine her eyes. They're mine. What a lie. We die, just not our time. I cry, oh my. And I just watch. She's rolling out, can't keep sticking around. And I cry. Is she doing fine? Is she breathing fine? And I can find it out. She's so hard to figure out. She's so lost in a cloud. You're so bored to me, just like home. You're so foreign. figure out. She's so lost in her clouds. You're so foreign to me, just like home. You're so foreign. You're so foreign to me, just like home. You're so foreign. I'm in my car. Your skin so soft, and I look at the sky, so bright, so bright, so bright. If I look tonight at the sky so bright, I'll find your eyes always haunting me at night. You and I, let's go on a pleasure cruise all night long. I'm so lost I can finally feel. And I'll ruin it if I try. And I look at the sky, so bright, so bright, so bright. If I look tonight at the sky so bright, I'll find your eyes always haunting me at night. You and I, let's go on a pleasure cruise all night long. I'm so lost I can finally feel. You and I, let's go on a pleasure